You're giving people confidence while you're creating their competence.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in a true student of leadership, Dr. Chris Fuzie, whose time in law enforcement and government has helped him see the power of identifying, teaching, evaluating, and modifying behaviors in order to ready yourself for the next phase of growth. Hello there, and welcome back into this most recent installment of the Growth Ready podcast. I am so excited to be welcoming in from sunny California, Dr. Chris Fuzie today. And we're going to be speaking a lot about leadership. But Chris, as I've educated you before we press record here, the only question I have for you, as I do with every single guest that is a premeditated question at least, is that of what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
So for me, being growth ready is taking advantage of things as they occur, look at problems as opportunities. And just before coming here, I had a meeting. I work here at a district attorney's office. I'm the business manager. And so one of our executive secretaries has left, and she resigned. And so now what do we do, right? So we just finished this meeting about, okay, this is how we're going to change things. And what do we want? Do we want to change positions? Do we want to change classification? What about all of the tasks? How are we going to deal with that? And so I see that as, just as things happen, don't always look at it as, oh my gosh, this is a problem. But, look at things as an opportunity. What is the opportunity you can get out of that? And even failure. If somebody fails, and I have a publication out about the success of failure, so you grow, you learn from failure. That's growth ready to me, so you can fit in some of these other things, and then, as stuff occurs, be ready for it. 30 years as a cop, you always prepare for what could happen. And then, if it happens, you do the what ifs in your head all the time. And then if something happens, you got to deal with it. And that's what I think of when I think of growth ready.
I love it. I love that you're coming in fresh out of a meeting where you've literally applied in practice what it means to you to be growth ready. And I think just taking that initial insight around just how do we take advantage of the situation or the opportunity as it occurs, as opposed to feeling that, hey, something like this is happening to me, or this is creating an issue. And all I hear straight away is just the intentionality and the responsiveness in your position as a leader. And as someone who's very much educated, not simply someone who's practicing leadership, but truly educated in the art of leadership as you are, I'm curious, like as a leader, where on earth do we start when it comes to having that ability just to recognize that this is a time for me to move into intentionality and responsiveness as opposed to falling victim to something, let's say, like a reactionary tendency?
Right. Well, it's not just the leader that's doing that. That's the biggest thing, is that in this meeting that I think it's so cool because it just happened. So in this meeting, we're sitting there talking about these positions, and then one of the people in the meeting said something about, well, if that were a paralegal, because that's more paralegal work rather than a confidential assistant work. That's more paralegal work. And I went, well, wait a minute. We do have a classification in the county of confidential paralegal. That would fit even better than what we're trying to do. And so I said, wait a minute, let's stop just a second. Let's think about this for a minute. And we roundtabled that idea, and everybody went, yeah, that makes more sense. And so it's not just the leader that comes up with this stuff, but you have to be able to recognize that. And when she said it, it was everybody else was just kind of there, and I went, wait a minute, hold on a minute. Now you're making me think. And it was great because it did change the whole tone of the conversation. So recognizing as those things happen, like just this thing that just happened, you as a leader need to take the opportunities with that, because you're not going to know everything as a leader. You don't know that you need to talk to your people and the followers and the experts and get it from them too.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, is that as a leader, yeah, I mean, you may be, who is it? I forget who it was. Jack Welch, I think, said, he's not that great, but he's surrounded himself with great people. And so I think that's the key there.
Yeah, and immediately just parallels and correlates over to this whole notion of growth in a more just with what we're talking about on the show is leadership parallels with growth in so many wonderful ways, as I think we're about to learn, is that from a leadership standpoint, you as a leader are always going to be better positioned when those that you are leading and or surrounded by understand the role that they play, and they're not just looking to you for all the answers, that you're actually empowering them and you're positioning them to
Right.
feel as though they can respond, that they can speak up, that even something like to roundtable something. Roundtables don't work if people aren't ready to actually provide insight.
Right.
It's a bit
Right.
quiet practice if people aren't positioned to actually do
Yeah.
what it is the practice entails. And it's the same with growth, right? I get as an individual, if you're driving your own growth, good for you. But at the same time, who are you educating on what it means for you to grow and what it is you're trying to get out of growth? And then how can they potentially somehow support and reinforce exactly that, what it is you're trying to achieve? The same
Right.
with you as a leader, right?
Right. Yeah. And just like in this meeting, these are the experts in all of those functions that we're talking about. So they were ready. They were, if it had been something else, the one who's not ready is my DA, because he doesn't know anything about this conversation yet. I've got to tell him. So don't publish this before he hears this. But so I got to tell the elected DA, hey, this is an idea that we came up with. And I'm going to give credit to the person who said it, right? And this is an idea that. And so, what do you think about this, boss? Where do we go? So, and then you touch on this thing with the leaders and followers. You also have people who are in that, I call it liminal space. That's what my book's about, is liminal space, the people who lead and follow at the same time. And so when you're doing that, when you're talking about growth, you have to consider the people that lead and follow at the same time, because they have to step into that leadership role. They have to step into the behaviors of leadership if they're doing leading and following simultaneously. And it could be like now. I mean, I took the advantage for doing that, had that meeting and stuff, but that was also knowing what my boss is expecting, and so I have to lead up a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah, 100%. And I think the notion of having experts around us, it's a reoccurring theme I say reoccurring, maybe every 4 or 5 episodes on the show. Someone will come on and just highlight exactly that. But they don't need to and or should be the smartest person in the room at all times. They understand that they have a role, but they surround themselves with people that not only know their role, but are empowered to speak up on exactly what their expertise are. And again, as a leader, from whether we're the one in the leadership position at the time, or we're stepping back and saying, hey, on this particular situation, you lead, I follow. Again, the mirroring in that of the growth journey is so similar, in that we have to find ways to not only surround ourselves with experts, but know when to say, hey, I actually brought you in as an expert because I want your expertise. And so often we'll do exactly the opposite of that. We'll bring people in, we'll welcome into our worlds. And even though we know they're more educated, we've created the narrative, we've created the story in our perspective.
right,
And we're driving our actions based on that, as opposed to actually allowing this person who can be of service to us to be exactly that, right?
right, right. Yeah, and sometimes the greatest thing a leader can do is ask a question or two and then shut up.
Right.
You know,
Right.
ask the question, let everybody else run with it, and then you ultimately, you get that feedback, and so yeah, it is that factor that you always want to know what they're bringing because they bring the information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity now just to touch on the failure piece too, going back to your initial response of, wow, you've come fresh out of this meeting and you spoke to that in terms of how do we take advantage of the opportunity as it occurs. At
Mhm.
the same time, how do we find that comfort in failure? I mean, this is a topic that has come up before on the show, but I don't think we can ever exhaust it, quite frankly, because I think there is arguably no bigger component in the growth journey than that of our relationship with failure. So I'd love for you just to kind of talk us through, even just piggybacking off that initial insight in terms of the role and the importance of our relationship with failure.
What's up, guys? Steve here with the Balance of Gray podcast. Do you ever feel like sermons skip the chapters you're living in?
What?
Like church turned into a TED Talk after a concert? Well, at the Balance of Gray, we ask real questions, wrestle with real doubts, and yeah, we leave room for some laughs along the way. Ooh. But make no mistake, prophecies are unfolding, and this isn't dress rehearsal. It's the final act. The gospel isn't a vibe, it's a rescue plan. And lukewarm doesn't cut it. From scientific proof to spiritual warfare, this is where faith is not blind. Search The Balance of Gray wherever you get your podcast and hit follow now. That's The Balance of Gray podcast. I'll see you soon.
Phenomenon is what it is.
So, I mean, that's how we learn. My doctorate is in education and organizational leadership, and I teach at a community college class. I've taught other classes, and we learn by trial and error. That's how we learn, and from the time we're born, we're learning things from our parents, from our whoever's raising us. We're picking up their stuff. So and just like even riding a bicycle, right? You get your kid on the bike and you run next to it, you hold the seat, you run next to them, and you let it go, and they go 20 feet and then they crash, sometimes horribly. But but you don't say, "Oh, look, you suck. You only went 20 feet." You don't do that. You say, "Hey, look at this. Look how far you went. I let go way back there. Look how far you went." And so you're giving people confidence while you're creating the competence, right? And then you put the kid back on the bike, and after they've cried a little bit and their knees are skinned up or whatever, and you put them back on the bike and you say, "Let's do it again." And then now they go 40 feet and then they crash, and you say, "Look at this, you went twice as far. That's great." You don't say, "Wow, you crashed twice." And because what it does, it has to do with the motivation, and then eventually the kid's doing it by themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so letting people fail is actually helping them grow. And so, and you can actually measure motivation. I've done this thing in my courses where motivation is it's a multiplication factor. So anyway, I won't describe the whole thing to you, but you can actually measure it. And I have people do this simple thing of tossing a penny into a like a garbage can, right? And we start it with way far away. They tell me how much they're wanting to do it. So, and then how confident they feel in their ability. And then there's some kind of reward. If they do it, they get X, right? And so you put that on a multiplication chart, and then ultimately, I only had it one time where somebody swished it the whole time, but most of the time people fail,
Sure.
but their motivation goes up because now it's like, no, I really want to do this now,
Yeah.
and that's how we create growth, is through that failure, and you can see it in the motivational factors with people. And so you look at the motivation theory, or I forget the name of the other theory. This idea that people will want to continue to try something if they feel they're capable. If you say, "Okay, I want you to toss this penny to the moon," absolutely out. They're not going to do it because they know it's impossible, right? So the motivation drops. But if it's something doable and they feel they're capable of doing it, they're going to try, even if they fail. And that's where the education part comes in, and understanding how people think, understanding how people learn is key. And that success, looking for the success out of failure, is why I keep saying that, is because you don't want to just, wow, you suck, you can't do this the first time. We don't want to say that.
Yep.
We want to say, okay, well, let's do better next time, and then adjust the behavior that you need them to do or something to make it a little more easy for them. And that's how people learn.
Yeah, and your anecdote around the learning to ride a bike could not be more relevant right now, as my 4-year-old boy scrapes his knees every week and learns how to do exactly that. And it is so funny when you watch a child learn that, and you see yourself, even here I am at my 40 years old, and say, okay, I'm still doing that. I'm doing it differently. I'm not on a bike anymore. I'm not maybe learning something like that as a brand new skill anymore. But you talk about trial and error. I tell people all the time, I've graduated hundreds of times from the school of trial and error. And it's a beautiful ceremony every single time, because of that idea that you just alluded to with motivation, is that at the heart of that trial and error is a motivation to keep going. Right. Despite the error, we learn from the error, we go again, and we keep going until we potentially learn something or win at something, or maybe who knows, master something.
Right.
And like that is, like you said, that is the growth journey. And I actually love the idea of there being a true theory at the heart of it as well, because I think that's something that we can all now in science, we can actually look at it from a scientific standpoint. Yeah, it's like, right. Oh no, it's not just me that's wired this way. We are wired this way. This is how we have become who we've become.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting that you mention it as a science, because leadership is based in science. That's why I'm the president of the National Leaderology Association. I know it sounds like some kind of crazy, otherworldly kind of thing, but leaderology is nothing more than the scientific study of leadership. And almost all of this stuff has some scientific theory that goes along with it that's been vetted through the academics. And so, we talk about leadership. Well, we need to talk about the science of leadership. And that's where leaderologists can help us understand that, if you hire a coach, maybe the coach has been a good coach, and maybe they had a good business for 30 years running a flower shop. And then, you hire them, they decide, I want to be a consultant. I'll be a leadership consultant because I ran a good business. And then you hire them and they come in and they're trying to tell you how to run your mechanic shop like they did the flower shop. Well, it's completely different. You can't do that. And so, but they don't know the theories. They may not have been trained in the theories. They may not have been educated in the theories. And so that's where leaderology has to do with understanding the theories and using those. So yeah, each one of these does have a theory attached to it, or several attached to it. Yeah.
I was made aware of the National Leaderology. Wow, it's hard to say, isn't it? Leaderology Association. Through your just through looking through your information, and again, for me, I am someone that, as an executive coach, I work with executives, I work with leaders. But I'm so careful. I've always been so careful in terms of how I carry myself and how I sort of name myself, because my respect for the fact that this is education and this is science. I don't stand there saying I'm a leadership expert. I don't stand there saying that you should be hiring me for my leadership knowledge and or expertise. What I'm telling you is that in a coaching situation, that's a very different situation to that of, let's say, being an educator, being an expert on a particular matter.
Right.
And it's why, and of course, it's why I was so excited to even have you on the show, is just to kind of speak into the science of this.
Yeah.
Because, as I've already talked on a number of occasions already, is how adjacent it is to the growth journey, and how we actually go through so many of what seem like just our own subjective emotion, when really there's so much more objectivity around it. And as we're talking to, science.
Yeah. Yeah, and the science to me is that's the part that I think is really important, is that we stay true to the science, because leadership and followership are actually changing a little bit now. We've kind of beaten leadership like a dead horse, and so where's the next big thing in leadership? Well, the next big thing in leadership is actually looking at followership, and how followership aids leadership. How followership is that's how you get things. Imagine, I did this we were getting ready to with the playoffs for football, right? And my team wasn't in it, so I was looking at it more objectively. So, uh, and then you see this stadium, this coliseum with 60, 70,000 people in it, and they're all rooting for one team or another. But imagine how much power you have with that many followers who are willing. If the team players, just the team players, let's call them the leaders, right? And they said, "Hey, I want to tear down this goalpost. The 12 of us are gonna tear down this goalpost." Could they do it? Probably not. But if the other 40,000 people in the stand said, "Hey, we're going to tear down this goalpost," right? We could get that done.
Yeah.
Why can't we do that same thing? We can do that with football. We could do that with baseball games. Why can't we do that with all of these other issues that we're dealing with in the world? We haven't learned how to harness the power of followership yet. And if we figure out how to harness the power of followership, maybe that's how the pyramids got built. I don't know. Maybe that but you think about the followership, and not just out of because somebody's getting paid or they're a slave, or that kind of, not just out of that, but if people actually really want to get something done, and you can harness that power of 40,000 people in the stand, you'll get a lot of stuff done. Yeah, I think it's amazing.
AI is changing the game of business. Will you be on the winning team? I'm Jordan Wilson, the host of the Everyday AI podcast, and your coach to help you learn the X's and O's of AI. Artificial intelligence isn't just a new player in the game, it's a new sport altogether. So if you don't quickly put AI into play, your competitors will run up the score. I've spent my whole life building winning teams, from coaching basketball to working with big players like Nike and Jordan Brand. My next move? Helping you win with Everyday AI. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or on everydayaipodcast.com. Let's tap into AI together and put points on the board.
Yeah, and it really gets me, my curiosity is really starting to kick in now in terms of just this notion of, when I think about we have leaders listening to this show that are probably eating this up right now, but at the same time, we have people that aren't leaders, or at least consider themselves to be leaders. And I want to almost tie in the relevance for them right now, because I see it, and I'm sure you can see it, but at the same time, I'd love to get more specific on how this can be something that we as individuals can embrace in our respective lives, because my mind already goes to, well, whatever you want to achieve and whatever you want to succeed in life, you better have followers. You better have people that want it for you as much as you want it for you as well.
Yeah. So the first thing we need to do is change our mental schema, change our mindset about leaders and followers. They're not opposites. But if I do this in my class, I ask people, okay, I'm going to do it really quick. I'm going to, you say the opposite of the word I say, right? And so I'll say up, they go down, in, out, fast, slow. And then I do a couple of those, and then I go leader, and people say follower. And then, but if you think about it, is follower really the opposite of leader? They're actually headed the same direction. They're trying to achieve the same goal. They're working, together collaboratively, etc. They're not opposite. And so that's the first thing that we need to change. The second is that we need to embrace the fact that we have so many people who lead and follow simultaneously. Any middle manager is leading and following at the same time. And so it's not about the role. Okay, so I'm the right here at the DA's office. I'm the business manager and the HR manager, so I wear two hats. And but do I look at that role as a leadership role? Do I look at that role as a followership role? Well, I look at it as both, because I have to follow what our elected DA says, and he follows the will of the people, right? So if he tells me we're headed in this direction, figure out how we're going to get there, then that's my job. I'm leading and following simultaneously. And that more people are in that position than anything else, and so to get past that is important. And then the third thing is that the idea of followers are less than is crazy to me, because imagine a leader trying to do anything without followers. That's just one person. Okay. But if you get 10 followers, now you've multiplied yourself times 10. And then it goes, kind of take it back to the idea of the power of followership.
Yeah.
I mean, like here at the district attorney's office, I tell people, I said, let's just say one of the legal clerks, right? And my job doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I said, think about this a second. If you didn't do what you were doing, then this person who's in jail for this heinous crime could be let out. If you didn't do this, not only do it, but do it correctly and accurately. And then, so you have to show people the value of their followership. And when bad things happen or something happens and they need to be they're the only one there. Let's say they're the only one there who can do this stuff. That makes them supremely important. And now they're actually leading from the middle, or they're leading from the bottom. I don't know how else to say that. The followership becomes supremely important.
Yeah, and even in some of the coaching I do now is like one of my favorite things with some of my clients is that they'll articulate that there they are at the top, and they're adamant about, while they want to continue to bring people along, they don't want to just bring people along with whatever their vision is. They want to bring people along in a way so that those people feel as though they can speak up and influence what's going on and bump them within the organization.
Right.
Because from a culture standpoint, that's really the only way culture wins.
Right.
If people can feel as though it goes both directions.
Right.
However you want to look at it. If you want to look at up and down or top and bottom, go ahead and look at it that way. But the fact of the matter is, like you say, that from the leadership and the followership, how do you, whether you be as a leader or whether you be in your growth journey, how do you do things in a way where, yes, you are in the driver's seat, but if it's only you in the car or only you on the train, whatever metaphor you want to go with, how far do you expect to go? How successful do you expect to be? So how early on in that journey, and I guess this is kind of where I'm going now with the question, is that when you even think about your own professional journey and your own career, how early were you able to acknowledge, like, oh my gosh, like leadership is only going to get me so far? When I desperately need to start taking a little bit more consideration into what it means for people to either follow me and or for me to exemplify what it means to be a follower myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that goes back to the value, people understanding the value of followership and the value of what they bring. And a good leader is going to treat people with that value and respect for each position, because you wouldn't have those jobs if you didn't need them, I would think, right?
Right.
So you have to, show the value for each one. As far as, me personally, it took a long time for me to, and I say a long time because I didn't even think about getting into the leadership stuff until I was about 40 years old. And I've been a cop for 18 years, and I was just running and gunning, having a good time. And every day was, you go out and it was all different, all new. You didn't know what you were going to get, so. But then when I started going back to school, I tend to say I only had a PhD, public high school diploma, until I was 40, because you could do really well as a cop with just that public high school diploma, And so when I went back to school, that's when I started figuring out this, like, wait a minute, this leadership stuff, this org leadership stuff makes sense. And then I started using it as a sergeant, as a lieutenant in the police department. I started looking at these situations from the org leadership lens. And I started seeing a lot of these things happening. And it's like, okay, I need to pay attention to. And then even teaching leadership for International Association of Chiefs of Police, they had a component of followership. And I taught the component of followership. We worked with followership. But it wasn't until after I left the police department, I started writing my own books, and I started really delving into this leadership followership stuff, that I realized followership is so much more important than we'd ever thought. And I look back on my career, and as a cop, you go to just any call, you go either there as the primary or the backup. The primary is the lead, the backup is the follower, right? And those roles could change. You go to the next call and you end up being the primary, and they're the backup. I never even put those two together until about 5 years ago, after being retired for 9 years, so then you start looking at that. That's why I say the leadership of followership are evolving, because people are starting to realize what's happening with followership and how important and how powerful followership can be. So yeah, for me, it didn't, it was a long time before I figured it out.
Yeah, but it's why I always appreciate these insights, because it's very encouraging to anybody that's hearing this potentially for the first time that may have gotten quite far, and it's like, wait, hold up a second. I was supposed to be looking at this through a lens of followership, not leadership. Like, what's going on here? Someone's flipping the script on me, and what you're able to tell us here is like, well, no, there's no reason to see it that way. We can just have an appreciation now for both sides, and say that, whether it be on our respective growth journey or whether it be in a respective role of leadership, we have the opportunity to ask these harder questions of just like, it's not enough to simply just grow or to simply just lead. What does it mean to have people in the boat with me as I'm going through this? And what does it look like for me to empower them to feel as though they are part of the journey? And then furthermore, how do I sort of come down to their level in a way and position them at times to say, hey, you know what? You're the expert, and I'm coming to you right now. Yeah. And I need you to feel as though I'm all ears, and I'm not just doing this to maybe check a box, for instance.
Right. Yeah. And you said something very interesting. You said, how did I come down to their level? And I think that's one of the things we need to stop doing, is talking about, and I'm not being critical, but in my thinking, you think of servant leadership style or some of these other things, and we still tend to think of that hierarchical thing, and it's like the two sides of a coin. That's where a lot of people think that followership is less than. It's not. And as a leader, we may be a high growth needs person where we want things to change all the time. We're looking for the new next best thing, and we want people to come on with us, and let's take that. But in that boat, you still need people who just want to row. Just let me row. That's all I want to do. Right. And the low growth needs people who say, leave me alone. Let me do my job. I enjoyed it. I've been doing it for 35 years. I'm very good at it. Just leave me alone. Let me do my job. You need those people too. And there's a lot of value in that. Yeah. And so when we talk about the hierarchical and try to take our mental schema and put it in we can't do that. And there's quite a few people here, and it's very interesting. We have one lady here who's been here like 30 something years, and I just talked to her. I said, do you have any idea? She goes, actually, I would like to make more money, but I mean, we all want that, but I'd like to just keep doing what I'm doing because I really enjoy this. Okay, well, I can't just give, it's government, right? I can't just give you a bonus or something like that, right? But if that's what you want, I'll make sure that happens. If that's the reward for her, and that's what's motivating for her, then I need to just make sure that continues. But this hierarchical thing is, I don't know how we get rid of it. And that's a challenge because we do tend to see that. And I think it could be how we've evolved as creatures. I mean, there's a hierarchy from, when our ancestors lived in the jungles. I don't know. That's an interesting part.
Well, and I appreciate you even pushing back on it, because for me, it helps me in the work that I do, and it helps anybody listen to this as well continue to challenge that way of looking at things. Because even hearing you say it back to me, I just go, at first I go, no, I appreciate that. And then at the same time, as you finished up your insight there, that's where I get stuck. It's just like, well, how do we kick this thing to the curb for good, man? How do we stop looking at this thing as a top down? How do we stop looking at this as a hierarchy when pretty much every single country in this world is set up exactly that way?
Right.
And so it's just like, okay, but to your point, the important, if we're going to ever optimize what it means to have followership, at some point that followership needs to feel as though they're just as much the table as the leader themselves. And the hierarchy mindset is going to be near impossible to ever get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, in my book, Liminal Space, I talk about the people who lead and follow at the same time. And that's why I say we need to push the positions or the roles to the back and talk about the behaviors. So, as an example, you get a brand new employee in, let's say, a warehouse, right? And the brand new employee in the warehouse, they've been there 2 or 3 months, and then they're told about some policy, and they read the policy and they go, this policy is the worst policy in the world. Why do we do this, right? They've just said those words. What answer would they get from their supervisor or their trainer? They would get, oh, that's the way it is. That's the policy. That's what we do. However, if the CEO of that same company says, wow, this policy really doesn't make sense. Why do we even do this? Right? What would happen? Everybody would go, well, yeah, the CEO doesn't think that we should be doing this. Why, we need to change this policy. The same two people, I'm sorry, the two different people, the newest employee and the CEO said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But yet we only act based on what the CEO said instead of what the new person said. Well, that new person is coming in with outside eyes. We should pay attention to that, and we don't. And that's part of the hierarchical stuff, is we put the power with the position, and I don't know how much of that is just natural, or has it been trained into us over millennia that in our countries and the way things have been built.
Yeah. And, one thing I try to do on the show throughout every episode is how do we personalize what is technically a professional conversation? Mm-hmm. And so something my mind immediately goes to is just here in my own house. It's just like history would show I'm the man of the household, right? Yeah. And I have a wife who's, history would say they're supposed to answer to the man. And then I have these children. It's just like they're going to do as they're told. And the one thing I'm proud to say in our household is that we're a team. We are for us to be an optimal house, we are a team. And any given hour of the day, the fact of the matter is someone is leading in this house. Now, I probably lead more than anybody else, but it's a shared responsibility between my wife and I.
Right.
I have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. And when my daughter needs to get to gymnastics, she's leading that. I have to follow that. I have to get her there. I'm not the leader at that point. She's the one who wants to go to gymnastics. And I am finding a way to make sure she gets to go and do that.
Right.
And for us in these, for if we're going to really, because a big part of this that I wanted to touch on is that so much I know of what you work on there with the National Leaderology Association is the societal change over time.
Right.
And it's just like, well, why don't we go the household? Like, why don't we say, hey, in our houses, and we can make this about growth too. We all want to grow. We all want to see progress. We want to see development. what does it look like for us to start practicing leadership and followership in our households to begin with, and say from that point onwards, could that be the launch pad for how we actually start to practice these very habits within the workplace too?
Yeah, it is about the behavior, because that's what it comes down to. It's about the behavior. So, like going to the sports, right? The child is the one who's leading that, and we just kind of show up. And I remember with both my kids doing soccer. One was on this side of town, one was on that side of town, and they were both within 15 minutes of each other. And so we had to split up and take them one way or the other. But it's the behavior that ends up driving that instead of the position. Instead of saying I'm this, it's like, okay, this is what I do. I focus on the behavior. And so that's why I say it's all about the behavior. And it doesn't matter if you're honest whether you're leading or you're honest whether you're following. It doesn't matter whether you are teachable as a leader or teachable as a follower. So it comes down to look at any behavior and what are those behaviors that are required to make that organization run. So, and that's where, like in the book, I talk about tessellations of behaviors. A tessellation is nothing more than a repeating pattern. It's a mathematical thing. So, you probably covered this in 10th grade math in high school, but none of us remember that. So, but this tessellation, it's just a repeating pattern that covers an entire plane or surface. That's what a tessellation is in math. And it's a geometric shape. So if you take the same idea, a geometric shape of, let's say, a triangle, and that's the top of the organization or the strategic part of the organization, what 3 behaviors can you come up with that benefit the entire organization, right? And then in the middle part of the organization, or the tactical part of the organization, you use a square. What 4 behaviors can you come up with that help the organization tactically complete its function? And then down at the bottom level, the operational level, you use a hexagon, and you say, okay, what 6 behaviors can we use that will help us operationally complete our function, right? And squares, triangles, and hexagons are, I forget the term because it's math. Those are the kind of shapes that can be interwoven, right? So they can be put together to make like a tile floor or, anything like that. So these are the ones that can be put together to completely cover an entire planar surface. So if you think about these as behaviors, so if we do tessellations of behaviors or repeating patterns of behaviors, what behaviors do we want? So think about baseball, think about football. Baseball, you want somebody to learn how to bat correctly. You want them to learn how to pitch, how to play first base. These are all repeated behaviors. And the professionals have done that, 10,000 times before you, yeah. So they've done that thousands and thousands of times. That's why they're professionals. Yeah. Same thing with any athlete. So why don't we put that into our workplaces also? Why don't we put in repeated patterns of behaviors that we want our people to do that will complete our goal or mission?
Yeah, it's the consistent theme that I'm just hearing is, how do we personalize it? How do we humanize it? Like that's at the heart of behaviors.
Right.
And again, like even going back to that anecdote around my own children is, the one thing that I learned through playing sport and then being a coach in sport for so long too, was the athletes that created the behaviors of accountability to go the distance with their sport with the ones that were empowered to actually practice those behaviors as younger age as possible. Like when the parent or the coach led their behaviors, drove their behaviors on their behalf, the athlete would eventually quit and not want to do it anymore.
Right.
When they actually, when the parent and the coach would sort of be more submissive and actually be the follower, so to speak. And I've used the word submissive again. That made it sound less than. I didn't mean to do that. But as opposed to just say, hey, listen, I'm not going to take the wheel. I'm going to be the follower. I'm going to empower you and applaud you for owning and identifying what your behaviors are authentically to do this. They did it, and they did it more consistently, and they did it to a higher standard. And what I'm hearing here is like, why are we not doing that in our organizations? Why are we not doing that within, in many ways, our own lives? Why are we thinking on ourselves for failure? And here you are like, okay, failure gives us repetitions to be successful, but at the same time, let's not be the cause. Let's not put it on ourselves, especially when we can have this success by simply, I love this idea of tessellation. I think it's such a unique perspective that can help people understand that it is repetitive and it is a pattern that we're trying to establish.
Correct. Yeah, and what's interesting is if you, it's like that game where you if you see a Volkswagen, you slug the other person. It's called slug bug or whatever, right? So once you start playing that, you see them all over the place, but otherwise you don't. Well, here's the same thing with tessellations. Tessellations are in beehives. Tessellations are in nature all over the place. Different leaf patterns are tessellations. Turtle shells are tessellations. Pineapple skins are tessellation, right? In architecture, I'm sure your bathroom floor right now probably has some kind of tile, right? And it's in a pattern. That's a tessellation. You look at architecture, the different styles in architecture, the way bricks are put into place, those are all tessellations. Tessellations are all around us. So why don't we start? They're natural. Why don't we start using them and in our behavior and creating these tessellations of behaviors? Not only can we say these are the behaviors that we want. Once we identify that behavior, now we can teach that behavior. And then after we teach that behavior, now we can evaluate that behavior and we can modify the behavior if we need to. It's just like teaching somebody how to play a sport. How do you teach somebody to free kick in soccer, right? What do you shoot for? You shoot for the corners. All of these things and if we have 13 behaviors for the strategic, tactical, and operational, 13 behaviors, I'd rather remember 13 things that I actually do rather than somebody's vision, mission, value statements that I will never remember, right? If I can remember the things that I need to know, and I know that, let's say honesty is one of them or something, that's not hard to remember. So for me, and then you go back to the education part of it, these are all of these things are in education. All of these things are help us grow. All of these, and the more times you practice, the better you get. Yeah, you're going to fail. I mean, even a pro baseball player has a percentage of how many, their batting average. That's only a percentage. That's all it is, and a good one is what, 300, right? And so that means they failed 700 times.
Right.
So I mean, if we could do that with our organizations, wow, how much better would we be?
Yeah, and whether it's organizations, whether it's the team that we oversee, whether it's the team that we're part of, whether it's our own journey, whether it's in our own household, whether it's just a new skill. I mean, this notion of identify, teach, evaluate, and modify, at the heart of that's the growth journey, it's the leadership journey, but most importantly, going back all the way back to the beginning. That's trial and error right there, baby.
Right there. Right.
Trial and error. It's how, are we willing to just say, hey, listen, I'm going to identify something that I'm going to work on, and I'm going to do it enough where I can actually learn how it is I do it well and how it is I suck.
Right.
And then and I can actually say, okay, well, now I screwed up a little bit. I can evaluate. I can look at it.
Yep.
And then I can modify next time. And lo and behold, you want to try again. And we go right back to that word motivation as well.
Yep, exactly. And then put these in terms of in business terms, right? So now that you've done that, if you cross-train people in those behaviors and in their different positions or whatever, you cross-train people. Now they're learning behaviors that they need to be successful in something else. Now you're creating a succession plan. And that succession plan, you go 3 deep in your succession plan and you start training those behaviors from the time people come into the organization. Now you're creating a successful organization that can grow with the entire company. And so we talk about growth, we talk about succession planning, you talk about developing people, cross-training, and with 13 different behaviors. If we create that pattern that we want, then I don't know how that it just has to be able to help,
Yeah.
and that's what I do here, and that's what I've been telling people to do, and it's been working.
It's been working. Exactly. It's been
Yeah.
working. And I think I'm a huge fan of simplicity
Yeah.
and things that just flat out make sense. And
Yeah.
I'm hearing that in abundance, Chris. And I will say that this is one of those conversations where I know we could probably just keep going and talk a lot. And typically that's my way of almost making a note that maybe 75, 100 episodes down the road,
All right.
you've written your next book. We'll come back on and we'll revisit things. But you've touched on a few things as we've been able to go through this from the book, and I've really appreciated that. And it's been just enough of a tease for us to be like, well, shoot, I gotta go read this book.
Yeah.
Where can we learn more about you? But most importantly, where can we maybe get a copy of this book? And hey, if there's anything else you feel we need to know and understand about the book, go ahead and share that with us too.
Well, the book is on Amazon, just www.amazon.com. You can find it on Amazon. Just look for Chris Fuzie books. And so you can find that and my other 2 books on there. And then if you want to find out more about me, it's cmfleadership.com. So www.cmfleadership.com, which is cool because I just have to remember my initials and that it's leadership and, simplicity, right? Yeah. The book it's a quick, easy paperback read. It's not it's not one of those ones where, it's a technical kind of, it's a story. It's a story about this person, and it's fictional, and I tried to keep it lighthearted and fun. The foreword was actually written by Ira Shalef. He's the author of Courageous Follower. And so I've talked to Ira several times about this idea and liminal space, and he really loves the idea and thinks it's good to go. So he was he was willing to write the foreword, which was, I thought, super cool, because he's one of the people that I learned from as I'm trying to get this education stuff. So yeah, it's there on Amazon. Pretty cheap, $19. It's not that big a deal. Or if you're on Kindle, you can also get it free. Yeah. Some of those you can get free at the Amazon Prime or whatever it is. Yeah.
Got it. Well, listen, all that information is going to be in our show notes, Chris. And
Perfect.
I got to tell you that I knew I'd really enjoy this conversation. And it's one of those where I blinked and 50 minutes flew by, and really just enjoyed the opportunity to learn from you, to really be challenged by you as well. Like as an executive coach, I'm always looking for like different insights and different ways that I can open and continue to expand my own perspective, and to learn that I'm still very much in that school of trial and error and graduating every single day in some way, shape, or form. And just again, conversation was absolutely delightful, and I just appreciate the generosity of insight. I know our listeners will as well. And from this point on, brother, just best of luck with anything and everything you've got going on in your world.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me, and we're all still with this trial and error. I think that's a whole lifetime event right there. So yeah. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I thoroughly enjoyed this discussion.
And my thanks again to Dr. Chris Fuzie for joining us on the show. And whenever we have an educator on the show, I'll tell you that I'm always feeling like I'm on my absolute, I have to be at my best, because I want to try to meet the person's knowledge as much as I can, and almost keep up, if you will. And it was really fun for me as a host to just feel challenged in terms of my perspective on a topic that, quite frankly, I'm very experienced on. But to know that someone is as educated as Chris was able to come on and shed some insights around leadership and tie it into growth, I thought was just phenomenal. But one really important takeaway for me is this notion of motivation, and the fact that It is, in fact, a theory. There is, in fact, a science behind it. I think sometimes we beat ourselves up around whether or not we're motivated one day, and then we love it when it all comes through and it's super easy and it comes so naturally. That's science right there. You're not on your own. It's not something you're experiencing that makes you strange or weird or anything like that. You're just human. And I experience it, and everybody that I know that's achieving or aspiring to achieve high performance within their respective world, they're going through it too. So the question just becomes, when you're in these situations where you maybe lack motivation, what is it you can do just to sort of bring things back around and almost recalibrate? Okay, what is it I want? What is it I want to achieve? And how do I put something out there right now that maybe is unfamiliar, that may create failure, but will at least take me in the direction that I need to go on this growth journey of mine? And if you can make sure that the effort that you're making is relevant, then likelihood is you're going to remain motivated and you're going to feel the need to go through repetition of trial and error. But as you heard there, in terms of that 4 steps of identify and teach and evaluate and modify, we get to practice this then time and time again and take motivation in it, because we know from a directional standpoint, we're trying to get to where it is that makes sense that we're trying to get to. So again, my thanks to Dr. Chris for joining us, and my thanks to you. As always, you don't have to listen to this show, but you choose to, and for that, I'm very thankful. At this time, if you are someone who's listening to the show for the first time, don't hesitate to subscribe, because this is a fantastic show. Don't hesitate to go back and listen to some old episodes as well. This is about 265 or something like that at this point. Make sure that you are going back through this encyclopedia of knowledge around growth and what it means to compete on behalf of your best self. That's what we do best on this show. Make sure you're sharing the episode with anybody in your world that you know could benefit from it. And in the meantime, folks, as always, best of luck with anything and everything going on in your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.